I know Danylchuk has been creating a war diary since the early days of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022. And that does, of course, seem like a considerable amount of time ago. Anna aims to tell the truth about Ukraine and Russia's war and cut out the noise and propaganda. And as you all know from our previous conversations, Anna is passionate about the independence and beauty of her country and is an extremely powerful communicator. Welcome to Silicon Curtain. Please like, subscribe, and definitely add a comment to the videos. It helps people to discover the incredible guests on the channel. Please also do check out the validated Ukrainian charities that appear in the description of the video. It's incredibly important for us to help Ukraine remain resilient at this time. Anna, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. You do have incredible guests and incredible hosts on the channel, and I'm honored to be in your community.
Well, always, you are the most honored, in fact, out of all of them. I have to say that. Everyone knows that on the channel. And I know many of the people watching Silicon Curtain are also subscribers to Anna's channel. And if you're not, what on earth are you doing? Subscribe now. Let's start with the so-called Peace Summit. This is an extraordinary initiative by President Zelenskyy. I don't know whether he thinks this will actually move peace forward or whether it's an attempt to keep Ukraine in the headlines. But have you been following the story about the Peace Summit? Because it seems that Russia and China are trying to sabotage this initiative.
Of course, I am following the preparation to this summit, and no matter in what format and with what parties present it will pass, I'm sure it is an important step, an important moment to look back in this 2.5 years of full-scale invasion, more than 10 years of Russian war against Ukraine. And I think it actually works as a litmus test for different countries who actually have to demonstrate that position. I'm not speaking about our close partners and friends who have demonstrated their support for Ukraine from the very first days of invasion, but here we see the position of China that for a very long period of time tried to pretend neutral, but we clearly see that Russia gets lots of supplies, military supplies from China, from North Korea, from Iran, and of course it does not fight this war alone. And we also see that Saudi Arabia is not eager to come because Russia will be absent. And I think this is actually a test for those countries who wanted to play neutral, but in reality are actively supporting Russia. So even to see them, even to make them state that position is very important. And I hope this will have some consequences for them, at least in the economical, political, diplomatic field. At least this would be honest and just.
And one of the stories we covered in the news summary that I do weekly on the channel yesterday is related to that, because on the one hand, you've got China clearly acting and talking in a way that supports Russia and supports the Russian narrative. You have China internally often amplifying and reproducing Russian propaganda to its own domestic audience. Behind the scenes, however, there's something interesting taking place. That is the attempt by Russia to rebuild its pipelines, its gas pipelines, not towards Europe, which of course is no longer possible. Well, some countries are still dependent on Russian gas, Slovakia, Austria, Hungary, no surprises there. But there's an attempt to move its pipeline capacity towards the east and its new partner in China. But it's been reported that China is not exactly being particularly easy on Russia in terms of the gas negotiation. In fact, it's seeking to get that gas at a ridiculously low cost per meter, cubic meter, really not much above the cost price of producing it. So what has Russia done here? It's gone from paying market rate and getting good hard cash from Europe to essentially being a vassal of China, and not a particularly nice China.
You are absolutely correct. And what I do not understand, why so many global leaders still repeat that we need Russia to protect ourselves from China, or that in any way Russia can prevent, I don't know, future Chinese interventions or something like that, when it is just the contrary. I am sure that before the start of the full-scale invasion, Putin definitely talked with Xi, trying to get his support or blessing or whatever. It did not happen without the Chinese leader knowing the plans of Putin, but Putin believed this will take 3 days or 3 weeks, and perhaps China did the same. Because what these authoritarian, enormously big countries do, they disrespect smaller countries. I think they disrespect all of the European countries. They disrespect democracy. And they honestly believed it will take just like seconds and nothing really serious will happen on the diplomatic economic arena. But China definitely sees that Russia failed. And Putin pretends to be a strong leader, ruler, and so on. Maybe it works inside Russia with all this censorship and propaganda. But for other authoritarian leaders, it's quite obvious that Putin failed. And Putin cannot survive with this without the support of China. They have like doubled the trade. They get the ammunition from China. They get details. They need to develop some of their military technologies, and they are very dependent on trade, on transport with China. And of course, China does not treat them as a partner. I think it did not treat them even before the start of the full-scale invasion, but now definitely. And it's actually interesting how weak Russian communication is when centered on China. We know that the far east of Russia is populated by lots of Chinese businesses, and they have actually rewritten their books, their manuals in China, naming lots of far eastern Russian cities on the Chinese way. And you don't see any reaction in Russia. They do not oppose that. They don't see any danger to their independence, sovereignty, or territory, when it's actually a very alarming signal. And if you see something similar happening, I don't know, in Sweden or in Finland, Russia would definitely protest, I don't know, address United Nations and so on. They swallow what China gives them. So, of course, the plan is obvious. In any case, be it Russian total failure and collapse, or be it Russian so-called victory in case, I don't know, Ukraine falls, West runs away, and all of that, China will get Russia, because Russia is weak, and that's the plan. And actually, to save us from this situation, it would be better to invest in the collapse of the Kremlin regime, potential dissolution of Russia, and new, more democratic, more negotiable states appearing that would be interested in their own independence, sovereignty, and potential would be good allies against Chinese expansion.
I think that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we've had a lot of conversations on the channel with people about decolonization of Russia. It has to be said that's not a conversation that many Russians are having, or that the Russian media is covering, or even the Russian opposition media. It's perhaps a conversation which only the colonized can have. Do you think that's likely, that this isn't a process of decolonization that is going to happen or come from the ethnic Russian areas? It's really going to have to come from those people in Yakutia, Buryatia, and all these other places. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
I think that we do not pay much attention to these various movements inside the Russian Federation that should have been and could have been supported by people who love democracy. I have listened to your interview with Harry Kasparov, where he spoke about this And you actually gave this brilliant idea, this lack of effort to communicate with the Russian population. And I know it from my personal experience when I participated in Aspen Berlin project for social media influencers in times of war and conflict. And one of my questions was to a specialist from the EU Commission on Strategic Communication. I may be wrong in naming the institution, and I won't name a person because this was a great chance to communicate. And I had a question. Okay, we cannot cross Russian borders, we cannot target Russians with missiles, but why don't we try to target them with this correct information? If we say they are zombified, if we explain they are not evil, they were simply deceived and brainwashed by the centuries or decades of propaganda, why on earth there are no like informational programs, informational interference when we try to reach the youth via all possible social platforms and other things, not throwing cards from the aircraft, which is impossible, but still in the modern world there's so many ways to reach them. And the answer was, we cannot interfere in the internal policy of an independent state. And you realize we're not talking about missiles, but we're actually talking about the saving of these poor zombified people. And you're not going to do anything because you still treat Russia as a legitimate country that, like an independent state, we cannot interfere. Russia has turned into a fascist Nazi country that is a threat to the world, that is ready to destroy everyone. And we are afraid to send them messages that can help them, give them some instructions. So it's really bad that even in this humanitarian area, in this area of information, no one wants to take a stance, no one wants to take a responsibility and to like follow the strategy that we have to inform people of Russia. If you so much believe in them, in the future of Russia, we have to start working with them right now. And nobody does that. And somehow they still consider this is a violation. Come on, kill Ukrainian civilians in hundreds per day is not a violation, but to tell Russians about that is a violation. So this is something very, very wrong. And that's why with no information, with super centralized Russia that is not the federation in reality, it is really difficult to help them develop their own states. But in general, it is true that Russia consists of 22 national republics and like Russian Federation, and Russia is just one of them. And if you look at Yakutia, if you look at Tatarstan, these are very different peoples, and these are peoples who actually wanted to be independent in the 90s. But gangs, criminal gangs and FSB, KGB agents stopped them from this, and now Russia is under total control of the Kremlin. They put their people in all of these positions. So for any serious dissolution processes to start, national elites have to shape, and Russia does not let this happen. Kremlin, Putin. And we are not helping them.
And we're not helping them, no. We're staying neutral. Don't get involved in the whole thing. And that, I think, is a tragic mistake. It reminds me a little bit of that meme when you're talking there. Most countries have a mafia, but Russia is the only place where the mafia has a country.
Right. Right. And, you know, once again, I don't know what is wrong with this world when we see Russian war crimes. We say these are war crimes. Most of like people agree on that, people who have eyes. We say that Putin is not legitimately elected. Even the European Parliament confirmed this. And still he's treated as the president, and Russia is treated as an active agent of the like diplomatic political life. And I think if many countries acted responsibly at least to the statements made, even Saudi Arabia and China would come to peace forum in Switzerland if they realize that no, Russia is no more modern Russia. Modern Kremlin is no more a political like agent. This is a criminal gang that must be treated correspondingly.
And this brings us on to, I think, the main part of the discussion, and this relates to the permissions, albeit the permissions with limitations to fire Western weapons into Russian territory. It's taken a long, long time to get to this point. It's ironic that Germany announced its intention to allow Ukraine to do that within hours of the US doing it. In fact, it's rather pathetic that Schultz has to follow in the shadow of US decision making, but they're only allowed to fire those weapons in the Kharkiv direction, not to protect Sumy or anywhere else. So every time something like this happens, the decision, the supply of munitions or some kind of unlocking of permission, it's always behind the requirement. It's always behind the point at which Ukraine would have been able to utilize the munitions or the permission to strike a decisive blow against Russia. Now, someone who's not cynical, and I'm extremely cynical at this point, might say, well, that's just sort of bureaucratic caution, etc. We've been watching this, you and I, very closely now for more than 2 years. This seems to me like a strategy. The strategy seems to be more to prevent Russian collapse than to enable Ukrainian victory.
That's obvious, unfortunately. And this is not the way to win the war and return back to normal living on this planet. It is obvious that before the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia was trying to persuade its allies, but also its potential enemies, that it is very strong and Ukraine is its zone of influence and it won't be a long battle, so you don't have to keep your eyes closed for a long period of time. It will happen in a moment, and then we will start negotiating. And as someone beautifully said, our allies actually before this invasion offered Zelenskyy not long-range missiles, but a helicopter to leave the country and, I don't know, give interviews as a president in exile. This is not the Ukrainian version. And we were strong enough, and I'm actually proud, and I think that it's less and less that we discussed this Ukrainian bravery and resilience that not many would have demonstrated and continue to demonstrate facing all of this brutality. And we continue doing that. I think many countries would have been demotivated long ago. But we know it's an existential fight, not just for Ukraine, but for all democratic countries that so much value freedom, choice, comfort, and all the good things. And from the very beginning, when it became obvious that Ukraine is not giving up, that Ukraine surprises the world with its resilience, creativity, I don't know, drones, strategies, and people, I think if we had all the weapons that we need, all the weapons that we were promised in the case of need, when we gave up our nuclear weapons, when we obeyed all the rules and restrictions, if we had everything that we need and deserve and were promised, were guaranteed, then we would have ended this war long ago with Ukrainian and democratic victory in a couple of months. It was really easy to clean Ukrainian territory of the invaders if we had everything that we may have now. For example, what was Russia doing during this 6 or 8 months of delay? First of all, Ukraine lost lots of beautiful people. Second, many people lost their motivation and did see it as a betrayal. Come on, we are strong, we are resilient, we are understanding, but we are also leaving people with our own emotions, hopes, and like trust. And then Russia was using it to get more of Ukrainian territory, to build defensive structures. Don't you think Russia takes it as a signal also, like that Ukraine, you were promised, but you were not giving, and so on? It is indeed can be compared with drip feeding, and we get things when we already don't need them to that extent. And something is lost. What is worse, someone is lost. And I know one of the German politicians following Russian narratives was saying that, well, if medicine does not help, we should stop giving it to a patient and, I don't know, let him die or what. But we all know that the effect of the medicine greatly depends on the portion of the one that you get. And for example, if you want to take down your temperature and you are given the amount of medicine for a 3-month-old baby, you won't feel it. It won't work on you. And unfortunately, the world is very much afraid of Russia, and the world feels safer with Russia when Russia threatens the world with nukes. It's unbelievable. Perhaps the world is very much afraid of taking actions and making responsible decisions. But we cannot stop it. Russia has started it. Russia will continue it. Some others will join it. So no matter how much leaders will escape the decision, it will reach them at a particular moment in time, but maybe even crossing the borders of their countries if we fail to stop Russia. And this lack of strategy, many people repeat that. Many people say that. We hear phrases like, we will support Ukraine as long as it takes, and so on. And I think that not only this decision to support Ukrainian victory must be heard and must be very vivid, but also the decision to defeat modern Russia must be, like, maybe it should go first. Our first task. Please, just like, if you look, all of this agenda is focused on Ukraine, like happening in Ukraine, casualties in Ukraine, infrastructure problems, prices because of Ukraine, and so on. People know on the background it's Russia, but like all attention is on Ukraine. Let's switch our attention. Let's even forget to a certain extent about Ukraine, and let's focus on what is happening in Russia. We have an illegitimate criminal gang comprised of Russian oligarchs that kill people, reaching them in your country. So even in your democratic world, you cannot feel safe because Russia can poison, Russia can interfere in your elections and elsewhere. So we have this very criminal, very bad not government gang that spoils the world life, like all around the world, in the US, in Europe, that manipulates, that uses natural resources that actually do not belong to the gang of these people to blackmail the world. Focus on that. And when we end this, we can switch to other tasks. So task number 1 should be to defeat Russia, to seek for justice, to see Putin and many others who supported him in the jail or other options available, typical for Russian society. And then, of course, serious work with Russian society needed. It is already needed, like since 2014, I think. And nothing is happening. And I don't know. Let's imagine like that we sacrifice Ukraine, or we sacrifice the Baltics or some other territories. Do you think Russia will stop? Will you feel safe with Russia? I think the mistake was when, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, most of the global democratic players decided they will focus on Russia, they will talk with Russia, they will decide with Russia, and Ukraine and all this Eastern Europe, Central Europe is just like nothing. And they have chosen a wrong partner, and this partner mocked them, humiliated them, and they still consider Russia a partner. When Russia is a dying monster, a pale resemblance of a superpower it was back in Soviet times. But people still treat it like, I don't know. And it's so wrong, I don't know how to change it, because when you describe crimes, when you describe things, people agree. But then when you come to a bigger picture, they start looking for whom shall we talk with in Russia. And what happens if Putin dies today, for example? What happens? What is the plan?
There is no plan. There's clearly no plan whatsoever. there's little to no investment in supporting any Russian opposition. Now, whatever people's position on that is, we know that internally Putin has been destroying anybody who shows a sign of any kind of leadership or initiative, anyone who could even be a potential leader. I'll name Nemtsov here rather than, ones that Ukrainians will roll their eyes at. But I think everyone agrees someone like Nemtsov had right from the start a fairly principled statement saying that invasion of Crimea was wrong. Very, very few people at the time were saying that. Very few people had the experience to govern and manage a state that's the size that it is. But of course, what Putin's done is destroy any institution that could nurture leaders, and has destroyed anybody who could be a potential leader or challenger. So when he goes, there could be some considerable chaos. We just don't know. And I've spoken to lots of historians and analysts. None of them have any idea really what's going to happen, including ones who are, very well versed in Russian history. The only thing that they will all say is that there's going to be some fairly grim and violent struggle, not just for the top job, but for the whole economy. Whatever enterprises are left, whatever crumbs are left on the table, there is going to be a considerable bloodbath in trying to get it. Now, I know you're probably, not going to be that discouraged by that. The idea of Russians fighting and sending it to chaos is probably the thing that Ukraine actually needs for a full and complete victory.
Well, yes, but like Ukrainians also understand if something very big happens inside Russia and continues for decades, this will also be a problem for us because unfortunately we are geographically located nearby. So if they start, I don't know, nuclear war inside Russia, we don't need it because the wind will come in our direction. So believe me, if Ukrainians had a choice, they would like this peaceful dissolution of Russia. And it's possible actually with some effort from people who can teach them democracy. I don't know, honestly, we have discussed this and I think it's important to summarize it. We see that everybody understands Putin is illegitimate. Democratic people in the world do not want to see all Russians as evil. They will often react to our Ukrainian assessment, which they should forgive us, taking into account that we are on a daily basis, people are killed by this very Russians, not by Putin. But let's say we have millions, 138 million Russians and so on, and nobody wants to help them then. You don't want to save them from their authoritarian leader who spoiled their life, who imprisoned them within Russian borders, who mobilized them to be killed in Ukraine, like 500,000 people already. Nobody in the democratic world also cares then about these people if we do not try to interfere and get inside of this society. We don't try to help Russia shape its future policy after the collapse of the Kremlin. What do we expect? We cannot treat Russia as a country similar to us, unfortunately, because they don't have any history of democracy. They don't know how to do it. You just like to wait that your child will, I don't know, cook lasagna for you. If he never did that, he won't be able to do it. And nobody wants to invest time, efforts, and even money into the education and preparation of this alternative inside Russia. So even if, for example, a huge alien spaceship falls on the bunker of Putin, killing him and his close relations, what will happen to Russians if they are left without all of that authoritarian network? They won't be able to create something democratic. They don't know how it looks. They don't know how it smells. They've never had this experience. And sorry, there is also something inherent in their more Asian, more hierarchical philosophy. So if we want to live normally on this planet, we have to start teaching them. Like, I don't know, we have to start introducing them that no human, there are countries where human life is valued. And actually, if you value human life, you get some bonuses. It's not that bad. And maybe if you stop stealing, if you stop like paying money for some decisions, if you start reporting corruptions, you will get Snickers just as the ones that were in Ukrainian houses. We have to work with them for decades to return them back to, I don't know, the level of democracy in Europe in the 19th century. They are very far away from us. The problem is that people look at Russia as if it is similar to us, but something bad happened for a couple of like weeks in it. No, these are centuries of very violent, very crazy behavior. And Russia does not look at the world from this European perspective. I've started working on the book about Ukraine, where I try to explain everything in very simple terms. And when I look back like 300 years ago, you know, this very decisive moment, the Battle of Poltava, when Ukrainian Hetman Mazepa was fighting together with the Swedish king against Peter the Great, considered Mazepa his associate, and we see in their correspondence, in the letters, that Moscow Tsar denied the support of Ukraine, even though all the agreements proved he should send the soldiers. Mazepa asks for 10,000 soldiers. He tells him, I won't give you even 10. And he does not back him up. And he says, scorched earth policy should be applied. So whenever I'm not giving you any backup, but you should start destroying your own land if Swedes come. And when Mazepa decides he does not want to destroy his country, there is no reason to do so. It is treated by Russia as a betrayal. Because Russians, they follow this very different from the European philosophy. They do not have mutual obligations. They do not have responsibilities between even like the boss and the subordinate, the suzerain and the vassal. They treat the Tsar, the ruler, Putin, as God, and whatever he does is legitimate, and you are nothing to question that. And that's why no agreements, no treaties, nothing can work with Russian philosophy. And we approach them as still a democratic or a European country. This does not work. It's just like trying to negotiate, I don't know, really with a bear, telling him, quoting him Aristotle or something.
And this is it's been said a couple of times on the channel, but I think it was very clearly expressed for me by a recent guest called Galina Ackerman, who she is a sort of journalist and academic in Paris. She's a sort of Soviet Jew who left in the 1970s. And she said, look, it's a mistake to treat Putin as any kind of independent entity, as someone you can negotiate with, as someone you can rationalize with. She described him more as a kind of automaton. He's on autopilot, and that autopilot seems to be on a kind of self-destruct, or he's going to continue so-called escalation and aggression until he destroys his own country. But it's as if he's programmed to do that. He's programmed with a set of rules. Unfortunately, those rules do not include negotiation. They do not include legal treaties and niceties and diplomacy and all the rules with which Western politicians are programmed. He's running on a completely different set of instructions, which are completely incompatible from the way not only Europe works, but also Ukraine works. And I think if we try to see Ukraine and Russia as being similar entities, we fall into a very, deep misanalysis of the situation.
Yes, yes. I think we can describe it as this tectonic fault or something that we actually observe here for centuries. Ukraine belonging to European democratic tradition and Russia belonging to authoritarian Asian tradition. And this is a huge mistake to measure, like what is good for Ukraine is deadly for Russia. What is good for Russia is deadly for Ukraine. And well, centuries of propaganda and disinformation distorted this image and like gave this Russian atmosphere around Ukraine and also European illusion of Russia, which is not the case. And Putin is definitely programmed by centuries of this kind of Russian philosophy. And just for a second, like I think that for any sane person, it's obvious that this is not a war for territories, because first of all, Russia is already the largest country in the world, which it cannot control fully or service according to the needs. So definitely they don't need new kilometers. And what they do to these territories that they get, they simply destroy it. What is Russian tactics in Volchansk? They drop like 50 bombs a day, erasing everything, and that's how they get the territories. They do not actually get the cities or people or infrastructure, they simply erase it. Once again, the very same scorched earth policy which Peter the First planned for Ukraine centuries ago. And this is the way they demonstrate it's the fight for the Russian survival. It's impossible with democracies at its borders, and it's also impossible without war. Because let's be obvious, Russia is a failure. The majority, like all the countries that escaped the Soviet Union, started developing. Look at or communist influence. Look at Poland. Look at the Baltics. Just like look at Ukraine. We are better than Russia even in times of war. And Russia failed. And for a moment, imagine that the war stops. What will Putin do? What millions of these people do? Their economy is like zero. All the numbers that you read and they pretend to be normal, they are fake. And Russia is all fake, just as its second strongest army in the world, just as it's like tanks and air defense. We see how Russian air defense is strong. All is fake about this country, and the only way to survive, to continue, I don't know, rolling, is to continue this war. The only way for Putin to stay at power is to say, oh, enemies are around us and I'm the only leader who will protect you. From what? From whom? Who on earth needs Tula?
And this is the
Nobody.
irony of Western policy. By drip feeding weaponry, by limiting Ukraine's ability to strike back, you're prolonging Putin's regime. You're prolonging, or the West is prolonging, not just the suffering of Ukraine, but they're prolonging this dictatorial regime and that facade, that sort of, pretend set of numbers, that pretend state and the pretend stability that is created by it. And all the while, Putin's regime is getting more desperate, more toxic. It's reverting to Stalinism far, far quicker, I think, than anybody, excluding myself, would have predicted, back at the start of the full-scale war. I was telling people in the middle of 2021 that Russia is descending into Stalinism, and people were utterly disbelieving of that idea. It could never happen here. Maybe Belarus, but not in Russia. And I'm like, no, once that process begins, it's going to accelerate. And that's exactly what we've seen.
For centuries. Because, for example, Peter the Great organized massacre in Baturin. It was reported in European newspapers of that time that already existed. Then there were Ukrainian Holodomor that many people around the world knew about, but still did not know how to react to this biblical evil and decided to turn the blind eye on. Then we had terror of the Soviet regime, like with millions of Ukrainians and other nationalities that died within this prison of peoples. And the same is happening now. So perhaps there will always be a very big percentage of people who are too afraid, who are too weak to react. And maybe our task is to focus on those who are strong enough and brave enough and value this world and its values actually more than the fear they experience.
That's why I think what you're
Because
doing is so important. I mean, it's so incredibly important to realize that this is a long-term and extremely existential struggle, not just for Ukraine, but for all the values, you know, that that Ukraine is aspiring to.
you know what is like many people daily in Ukraine who were not military at all, who were school teachers, pizza makers, I don't know, who works in law firms, who travel the world, who have dogs that they like, who have children and families that they love. Many of these people are now on the front lines. And on these front lines, sometimes they go on tasks and missions, and they have to walk. Look, do you know that those who come to the zero line, if I'm correct, like to name it this way, they walk. They cannot drive. They have to walk because like the car will be thin and destroyed. So they walk at night. And these walks are difficult. In winter or in autumn, it's very muddy, and the east of Ukraine, all this beautiful soils that Ukraine is so known for, they are extremely deep and they get with water. It's really difficult to walk. And it is at night. And these people, just a war goer like you and me, they were not trained military machines like Rambo style people. They were ordinary, I don't know, hipsters. And they are told to go and do the task. And they are smart enough to understand that like 50-50 or sometimes 60-40, not for their benefit, that they will return. And they start this walk. And they walk this 4 or 5 kilometers at night when it's cold or wet in the mud, living their lives behind them. This is such a sacrifice, and at the same time, such a strong will. Recently, one of my really close acquaintance lost her husband, who was marketologist, and he was in the Ukrainian army for 2 years already, of course, with no normal vacations, and he survived a number of really serious battles in Serhiy, in Avdiivka, and elsewhere. And his car was targeted by a Russian drone, and he was murdered by Russia. And she shared on Facebook his last photo that he took. It was somewhere in the Donetsk region, and it was a photo of rails, like a railway, not station anymore, but just rails. And he signed this photo. My home is somewhere there. So perhaps it was in the direction of our region that the rails are heading. And those soldiers, they cannot leave their positions. They cannot return home where they have their bed, their shower, their table. These soldiers were not born military machines. They were ordinary people just like you and me. And they cannot leave their position. And imagine how strong they should be to make this decision to stay and fight. And this is what many people who start talking about taxes, Russian blackmail, anything like political elections and other stuff, they forget that we have so many that strong people that do not start walking in the direction of their home. They do not escape their positions. They die there. And they never return home. And this is what Ukraine does every day to stop this evil. And if we don't stop it, it will continue. And unfortunately, many will run away. But there is always this like limit. You cannot run all of your life. And of course, it is much better to protect NATO countries, not on the territory of NATO countries after that border is crossed. It is much better to help those crazy, insanely resilient Ukrainians do the job. And we are not asking for jewels or computers. We are asking for weapons that we use to stop mass killings of people who are just like you. And this is insane that we have to spend that much time asking for this. But this is nothing new. This is what was before and during the Second World War and so on. Unfortunately, we do not learn on our mistakes, and we do not treat criminals the way they deserve.
And the last sort of, not really a question, but the sort of last statement there, which would be interesting to hear you say it, that border seems a very long way away from Paris or Berlin. But for that guy on the front line, I'm sure Europe does not feel a long way away. And those shared and common values and the aspiration to be able to vote, to be able to look after his family, to be able to, believe in a religion or practice religion freely, or be an atheist freely, or, say whatever you want. It must feel to him that those things are very immediate, and Europe is not far away at that point from people's minds. Unfortunately, the division between Ukraine and Russian values, Ruski Mir, that also is extremely apparent and extremely clear. And unfortunately, it seems that it's not quite so clear, at least in Berlin. I think in Paris, it's far better understood than it was last year. I think in the UK, we've always had a certain understanding of what it is. But we need to realize that quickly.
Of course. And I live in Lutsk. Lutsk is in Ukraine. Soviet Union was here once. And Berlin is much closer to my home than Moscow. In kilometers. That's what many people do not think about too. They have this image of great Russia that was created by Leo Tolstoy, for whom after Germany, Russia began. And there are so many beautiful cultures on the way from Germany to Russia, actually. And I want to ask the people of the world, if you don't want to fight, if you don't want to volunteer, if you don't want to donate, at least read the books, look history, interesting TV programs, and discover this part of the world that is not Russia, that was hidden, was stolen from you, that was sacrificed after the Second World War. And this is going to be interesting. This is going to be a good discovery for you. You know, I'm so surprised that I have friends in Lithuania who tell me that they have fewer tourists because they stopped traveling in this direction, as they consider Lithuania already a dangerous zone, a war zone, something. When for Ukraine, like, my city is considered a very safe zone. Like, you see how differently we treat the world. And I encourage you not to be afraid, but actually visit these countries, discover them, see how different they are from Russia and how sometimes close they are to you. Because this ignorance, not knowing them, is actually a bonus for Russia that can bring you the messages. Don't be afraid to travel to Lithuania, to Latvia, to Estonia, to Poland, to Moldova, to Romania. And some beautiful day, I'm sure I will invite you to Ukraine, and you will see what so many foreigners who come to me, to my country, say, oh, you're so normal, you're just like us. And I take it not as an offense, but as a compliment, because There were so many mistakes in the past. Not only evil Russia and its propaganda, but also lack of our efforts to make ourselves visible. We believed we still have more time. It turns out we don't. Turns out many beautiful people learn and want to discover Ukraine more. But please, just like open this part of the world for yourself and stop associating it with Russia. And for a second, let yourself look at Russia as an horde, not an empire, as a yoke, if I'm correct. Because what Cossacks always addressed, Ukrainian Cossacks, Moscovia, they would say Moscow yoke. They would not say Moscow empire or Moscow, because that traditions of invasion, looting, raping, and simply like eating everything and running to the next territory, they repeat it from century to century. And if you look from a different perspective on this part of the world, you may get lots of very interesting like revelations, and it can actually help you make correct decisions based not on Russian propaganda and Russian fakes, but on your own experience, on your own knowledge.
Well, we'll end there. I think those are incredibly powerful thoughts and words to end on. I can't add any value to that any more than you have. I think it's so important. I know I'm so pleased that you run your channel daily. I encourage people to look at all your videos as I do, and I'm extremely grateful that you continue to share those on this channel as well. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!